It begins, as all things of true consequence must begin, not with a bang, not with a proclamation, but with a question. It is a question so simple, so apparently innocent, that it slips past the gates of our consciousness unnoticed, like a wisp of smoke under a door. Yet once inside, it lingers. It curls around the beams of our certainty and chars the foundations of our complacency. The question is this: why are we like this? You have asked it. I have asked it. Every human being who has ever paused, even for a single breath, to contemplate the sheer, bewildering spectacle of human existence has asked it. You see it in the newspaper, on the glowing rectangle of your phone, in the history books that gather dust on shelves, in the eyes of a stranger on a subway, and in the mirror on a sleepless night. We are a species capable of composing the Missa Solemnis and of building the gas chambers of Treblinka. We can split the atom to power a city or to vaporize one. We can fall to our knees in awe before a sunset, and we can tear another human being apart with our bare hands over a perceived slight. We are, as the poet said, the glory, jest, and riddle of the world. But the riddle is not an abstract puzzle to be solved over brandy in an Oxford common room. It is a wound. It is the central, bleeding contradiction of our existence. And for the most part, we have learned to look away. We spend our lives constructing elaborate narratives, vast and intricate mythologies designed to explain away this contradiction. We tell ourselves, essentially good. We are rational. We are the apex of a grand, progressive story, the heroes of an epic that began in the primordial ooze and is destined to end among the stars. We have created civilization to tame the beast within, and we believe, with the faith of true believers, that the beast is caged. We look at the atrocities of the past, the Crusades, the Inquisitions, the slave ships, the world wars, and we categorize them. They are aberrations. They are the products of ignorance, of superstition, of a time before we knew better. They are locked away in a dark room in the basement of history, and we have thrown away the key. We are modern. We are enlightened. We are different. But the door is always there, and you can hear the scratching on the other side. The truth about human nature is not a pleasant fireside tale. It is not a reassuring lesson in self-improvement. It is a stark, unforgiving landscape of ice and stone, a place where the winds of primal impulse howl without mercy. It is a landscape that most of us spend our entire lives, our entire vast and complicated emotional and intellectual energies trying to ignore. To look upon it directly, to turn your gaze inward and refuse to flinch, requires a kind of courage that is rarer than heroism on a battlefield. It is the courage of radical self-honesty. For what you will see there is not only the worst of the world, reflected like a funhouse mirror, but the worst of yourself. The potential for every cruelty, every betrayal, every act of cowardice and indifference that has ever stained the pages of human history lies curled within you, sleeping, and it is dreaming. This is a journey into that landscape. It is not a brisk hike with a clear destination and a rewarding view. It is a slow, deliberate, and arduous descent. It is a walk through 10 of the harshest truths about what it means to be human. There will be no comforting conclusions here, no easy answers, no 7 steps to a better you, only the cold, clear, and unforgiving light of reflection, only the sound of your own footsteps on the stone. Let us begin with the first truth. It is perhaps the most foundational and the most consistently, the most passionately, the most violently denied. It is the truth from which all others spring, like poisoned rivers from a poisoned source. Here it is. You are not the hero of your own story. You are an animal, driven by impulses you do not understand. This is a hard saying. Who can hear it? We walk through the world with a profound and seemingly unshakable sense of self-awareness. We have a name, a history,
a set of preferences, a political affiliation, a moral code. We have hopes and dreams and regrets. We experience this internal monologue, this constant chatter of the I, and we believe, with the certainty of a child believing in Santa Claus, that this I is the captain of the ship. We believe our decisions are the products of logic and reason, that we weigh evidence, consider alternatives, and arrive at conclusions through a process of conscious deliberation. We believe we are in control. But look closer. I do not mean look with your eyes, or even with your mind as you usually use it. I mean look with the cold, detached gaze of a biologist observing a specimen. Watch the subtle flare of heat in your chest, the almost imperceptible clench of your jaw when someone cuts you off in traffic. Before you can even formulate the thought, that person is a rude and dangerous idiot, your body has already reacted. Your amygdala has sounded an alarm. Your adrenal glands have squirted cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your heart rate has increased. Your muscles have tensed for action. The conscious thought, the indignant narrative you construct about the other driver, is not the cause of this reaction. It is the effect. It is the story your conscious mind tells itself after the animal has already reacted, to make sense of the physiological storm. Observe the quiet, creeping envy that insinuates itself into your consciousness when a friend announces a significant success. You smile. You offer congratulations. You may genuinely feel happy for them. But underneath, like a snake in the grass, there is something else. A flicker of comparison. A subtle sense of diminishment. A calculation of how their achievement affects your own standing in the invisible hierarchy of your social world. This is not a reasoned response. You did not choose to feel this way. It is the ancient software of status competition running beneath the modern operating system of friendship and social grace. It is the echo of a time when your tribe had a limited supply of meat and someone else's success in the hunt might mean less for you and your offspring. Notice the instinct, so powerful it feels like gravity, to align yourself with the powerful and to distance yourself from the weak. Watch how people gravitate towards the successful, the charismatic, the famous. Watch how they subtly, often unconsciously, avoid the failing, the sick, the socially awkward. This is not cruelty, at least not as a conscious choice. It is a survival mechanism. Throughout our evolutionary history, being associated with the powerful increased your chances of survival. Being associated with the weak could get you killed. This calculus is etched into the very structure of our social brains. We are still, in so many ways, the anxious primate, constantly scanning the troop for signs of who is rising and who is falling. These are not reasoned responses. They are not the products of a noble, rational mind. They are the echoes of 1,000,000 years of evolution. They are the ancient, stubborn, and powerful software that runs the hardware of your body. Your conscious thoughts, your carefully constructed sense of self, your I, is not the programmer. It is, at best, a user who is barely aware of the code running in the background. At worst, it is a passenger in a vehicle being driven by a ghost. You are a biochemical machine. This is not a metaphor. This is a statement of fact. Your thoughts, your moods, your desires, your very sense of who you are all inextricably tied to the ebb and flow of neurotransmitters and hormones, to the firing of neurons in specific patterns laid down by genetics and experience, to the complex interplay of electrical and chemical signals that constitute your nervous system. When you are in love, you are, in a very real sense, experiencing a carefully orchestrated neurochemical event designed to ensure pair bonding and reproduction. When you are angry, you are in the grip of a physiological cascade designed for conflict. When you feel spiritual awe, you are experiencing a specific pattern of brain activity that can be induced by magnetic stimulation. This does not make these experiences less real or less meaningful, but it does make them less yours than you think. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, that great diagnostician of the human soul, spoke of the will to power. He did not mean merely a crude lust for political dominance, though that is one of its manifestations. He meant a fundamental, pre-rational drive inherent in all life. It is the drive to grow, to expand, to overcome resistance, to become more than what one is. It is the force that makes the ivy climb the wall, the lion stalk the gazelle, the artist slave over a canvas for years, the scientist dedicate their life to a single elusive truth. This drive is not a choice. It is not something you decide to have. It is the condition of your existence. You are an expression of it, whether you know it or not. You may dress this drive in the finest clothes of altruism or piety or intellectual pursuit. You may call it ambition or love or the search for God. But at its root, it is the same impersonal, inexorable force that animates the simplest bacterium and the most complex ecosystem.
To accept this, truly accept it, is to feel a profound and unsettling sense of vertigo. It is like standing on what you thought was solid ground and realizing it is the deck of a ship, and the ship is moving, and you are not the one at the helm. If you are not the rational, self-aware captain of your destiny, if your most cherished beliefs and noble intentions are, in part, the elaborate justifications of a creature driven by blind impulse, then who are you? What is this I that you have spent your entire life cultivating and defending? The answer, whispered by a century of psychology from Freud to the present day, is deeply unsettling. You are largely the passenger. The ship sails itself. Your conscious mind is not the captain in the wheelhouse. It is more like the ship's public relations officer, standing on the deck after the voyage is complete, giving a press conference about the journey, inventing noble reasons for the course that was taken, while below the waterline, in the dark engine room, vast and ancient forces have been doing the real work all along. Sigmund Freud, whatever one thinks of the specifics of his theories, bequeathed to us this most uncomfortable of gifts, the idea of the unconscious. He proposed that our minds are like icebergs. The small part above the water, visible to ourselves and others, is the conscious mind, our rational thoughts, our self-awareness. But the vast, overwhelming mass below the surface, hidden and dark, is the unconscious. This is the realm of primal instincts, of repressed memories and desires, of fears and conflicts so threatening to our self-image that we have banished them from awareness. And it is this hidden mass, Freud argued, that truly determines our behavior. Our slips of the tongue, our dreams, our neuroses, our choices in love and work, all are shaped by forces churning in the depths, forces we cannot see and refuse to acknowledge. The conscious mind is not the master of the house. It is, at best, its apologist. Modern neuroscience has only deepened this unsettling picture. The work of Benjamin Libet in the 1980s, using EEG to monitor brain activity, suggested that the unconscious brain shows signs of preparing for a voluntary action before a person consciously decides to act. The conscious decision, it seems, comes after the fact, a lagging indicator of a process already underway. More recent and sophisticated studies have both refined and reinforced this fundamental insight. Our sense of conscious will, of being the author of our own actions, may be a powerful and necessary illusion. The feeling of "I decided to do that" may be the brain's way of creating a coherent narrative of selfhood, a story it tells itself to make sense of its own, largely unconscious operations. Think about that for a moment. The feeling that you are the one making decisions, the inner voice that says "I will raise my hand" or "I will say this word," may be a post hoc construction. The decision, in neurological terms, may have already been made. Your consciousness is not the general issuing the orders. It is more like the ship's public historian, chronicling the battle after it has been fought, creating a coherent story out of the chaos. The I that you know, the I that you are so intimately familiar with, may be less a commander and more a narrative. And narrators, as we know, are not always reliable. They have a vested interest in making the story sound good. They have a vested interest in making the protagonist, this I, look like a hero. This brings us to the most painful part of this first truth. The illusion of control, this comforting fiction of the rational, heroic self, is not just a harmless quirk of our neurology. It is the foundation upon which we build our entire moral and psychological existence. It is the source of our pride, our shame, our judgments of others, and our forgiveness of ourselves. If we are not truly in control, if our actions are the complex product of genetics, environment, unconscious drives, and neurochemistry, then what happens to responsibility? What happens to blame? What happens to praise? This is the abyss that the first truth opens up at our feet. It does not ask us to abandon the concepts of morality or responsibility, but it does demand that we completely reimagine them. It asks us to look at the person who has wronged us and see not a purely evil agent, but a nexus of causes and conditions stretching back to the dawn of time. It asks us to look at our own finest achievements and see not the result of our own pure, unaided will, but the fortunate confluence of 1,000 factors we did not control: our genes, our upbringing, our culture, our opportunities. It asks us to replace judgment with understanding and pride with a kind of humble cosmic gratitude. This is not an easy task. The ego does not surrender its throne without a fight. It will resist this truth with every weapon in its considerable arsenal. It will call it nihilism or fatalism or an excuse for bad behavior. It will insist with the vehemence of a drowning man that it is the captain, that it is in charge. It will point to moments of apparent choice, of moral struggle, of heroic self-sacrifice as evidence of its sovereignty. And it is not entirely wrong. There is a sense in which we choose. There is a reality to conscious deliberation. The architecture of the brain allows for a degree of flexibility, for a feedback loop between conscious thought and unconscious impulse. We are not simply automatons. We are more like complex, self-modifying systems. We can, through effort and awareness, influence the programming. We can create new habits, challenge old beliefs, and steer the ship to some small but significant degree. This is the work of a lifetime. It is the work of philosophy, of therapy, of meditation, of all the practices that aim to increase self-knowledge. But this limited, hard-won influence is a far cry from the absolute sovereignty we imagine we possess. It is the difference between a captain in a storm and a leaf in a hurricane. The leaf has no choice. The captain, though battered by forces far greater than himself, can still trim the sails, adjust the course by a few degrees, and perhaps, just perhaps, make it to a safe harbor. The first truth, the harsh truth that you are an animal driven by impulses you do not understand, is not an excuse for passivity. It is a call to a more difficult, more honest form of agency. It is the starting point for any genuine self-mastery. You cannot steer the ship until you admit you are not the wind, not the waves, and not the tide. You are just the sailor, fallible and small, trying to find your way. This realization can be paralyzing or it can be liberating. It is paralyzing if you cling to the old illusion, if you despair at the loss of your imagined omnipotence, but it is liberating if you accept it. If you are not solely responsible for your own greatness, then you are not solely responsible for your own failures. The crushing weight of the ego, the burden of constantly having to be the hero, to be right, to be in control, begins to lift. You can look at your own dark impulses with a little less shame and a little more curiosity. Ah, you can say, there is the ancient fear again. There is the tribal instinct. There is the will to power, asserting itself. And in that moment of recognition, you have already taken a small step away from being blindly driven by it. You have introduced a sliver of light into the engine room. You have begun the slow, difficult work of becoming, perhaps, not the captain, but something more than just a passenger. You have become an observer. And for a creature lost in the storm of its own nature, the ability to simply observe, without judgment, without panic, is the beginning of wisdom. So the first truth is not a conclusion, it is a door. It is the heavy iron door that leads down into the lower decks of the self, and on the other side of that door, waiting in the darkness, are all the others. The second truth, which follows from the first with the grim inevitability of night following day, is this: your morality is a luxury, not a compass. We like to believe that our ethical principles are solid, immutable truths. We imagine them as a kind of internal compass, a moral north star that guides our behavior through the darkness of temptation and confusion. This compass, we believe, is reliable. It points true north regardless of the weather, regardless of our circumstances. We look at people who commit atrocities, the tyrants, the murderers, the torturers, and we label them as monsters. We draw a clear, bright line in the sand and say, I am on this side, they are on that side. I would never do that. This distinction is fundamental to our self-image. It is the bedrock of our moral identity. But history, psychology, and simple, honest observation tell a radically different story. Morality, for the vast majority of human beings, is not a compass that points true north regardless of the storm. It is more like a coat. When the weather is fair, when the sun is shining and our bellies are full, and our place in the social order feels secure, we wear it proudly. It is a comfortable, familiar garment that identifies us as civilized people. But when the temperature drops, when the winds of fear and scarcity begin to howl, when survival itself is at stake, that coat is the first thing we shed. It is a luxury good, and like all luxury goods, it is the first thing to go in a crisis. This is not cynicism. This is a sober assessment of the human animal under pressure. Think of the simplest, most classic example, the starving man who steals a loaf of bread. We may judge him if we are feeling particularly unforgiving, but most of us, if we are honest, understand. We recognize that the biological imperative of survival is a force so powerful it can override the most deeply ingrained social norms. But the line is thinner, far thinner than a life or death struggle with starvation. It is a line that can be crossed by much less. Consider the work of Stanley Milgram. In the early 1960s, in the shadow of the Holocaust, this Yale psychologist designed a series of experiments to understand how ordinary people could be complicit in genocide.
He recruited ordinary men from the community, teachers, laborers, professionals, to participate in what they were told was a study on memory and learning. They were cast in the role of teacher and instructed to administer an electric shock to a learner, an actor unknown to them, every time the learner made a mistake. The shocks were not real, but the participant did not know that. The shocks increased in intensity with each mistake, from a mild 15 volts to a dangerous and clearly labeled 450 volts. As the voltage increased, the learner could be heard through the wall, grunting, then complaining of a heart condition, then screaming in agony, then falling silent. The teachers were ordinary people. They were not sadists, they were not monsters. And yet when an authority figure in a lab coat sitting nearby calmly instructed them to continue, a staggering 65% of them administered the full series of shocks, all the way to the final lethal 450 volts. They protested, they sweated, they showed signs of extreme stress, but they continued. They continued because they were told to. They continued because they had ceded their moral authority to an external source. The line between "I would never do that" and "I am doing it right now" turned out to be not a line at all, but a permeable membrane, easily crossed when the right pressure was applied. If Milgram showed the power of authority, the Stanford prison experiment conducted by Philip Zimbardo in 1971 showed the power of role and environment. He took a group of psychologically healthy, ordinary college students and randomly assigned them to be either prisoners or guards in a simulated prison set up in the basement of the psychology department. The experiment was intended to last 2 weeks. It had to be shut down after only 6 days. The guards, given uniforms, sunglasses, and the authority of their role, quickly descended into sadistic and dehumanizing behavior. They subjected the prisoners to psychological torture, humiliation, and sleep deprivation. The prisoners in turn became passive, depressed, and traumatized. Ordinary young men, in the space of less than a week, were transformed into perpetrators and victims. The situation, Zimbardo concluded, had overwhelmed their individual personalities and moral codes. We see this principle writ large in the darkest chapters of human history. At Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq in the early 2000s, ordinary American men and women, military police officers with no prior history of sadism, committed acts of torture and sexual humiliation against Iraqi detainees. Photographs emerged that shocked the world. How could this happen?
Consider the mother's love. It is, without question, one of the most powerful forces in the natural world. But from an evolutionary perspective, what is its function? It is a biological imperative, exquisitely designed and hardwired by millions of years of natural selection to ensure the survival of her genetic material. Her child carries half her genes. Her love, her fierce protectiveness, her willingness to sacrifice her own comfort and safety is the most effective mechanism evolution has ever devised for ensuring that those genes are passed on to the next generation. This does not make her love any less real, any less profound, any less beautiful in human terms, but it does mean that it is not unconditional in the way we imagine. Its condition is, at the most fundamental level, genetic relatedness. The love a mother feels for her child is, in a very real sense, the love of the genes for themselves. It is the universe's longest-running act of self-replication, dressed in the warmest, most tender of human emotions. The bond between comrades in arms, the soldier's sacrifice, is similarly rooted in ancient evolutionary logic. We evolved in small, tightly knit groups where survival depended on intense cooperation and mutual defense. The bond between warriors, the willingness to die for one's comrade, is an extension of this tribal instinct. The soldier is not dying for an abstract idea of humanity. He is dying for his tribe, his in-group. His sacrifice strengthens the bond of the group, ensuring its cohesion and increasing its chances of survival in a hostile world. The group in turn will protect his memory and his family. It is a profound and noble transaction, a deeply felt exchange of loyalty and protection, but it is a transaction nonetheless. Its currency is group survival. Even the most seemingly selfless acts, the stranger who risks their life for another, can be understood within this framework. There is the immediate, visceral empathy, the mirror neurons firing, the instinct to help another in distress that is hardwired into social species. There is the powerful, if unacknowledged, desire to live up to an internalized ideal of heroism, to feel the surge of self-worth that comes from being the one who acted. There is the calculation, often made in milliseconds below the level of consciousness, of risk versus reward, where the reward is not a material good, but the profound psychological reward of being a good person, of being the hero of one's own story. We give to charity. We may tell ourselves we do it purely to help others, and that is part of it, a real and genuine part. But we also give to alleviate the anxiety of our own privilege. We give to feel good about ourselves. We give to signal our virtue to our social group. We give to feel a sense of agency in a world full of problems we cannot solve. The act of giving is almost always accompanied by a psychological get. It makes us feel better. It reduces our discomfort.
It reinforces our identity as a compassionate person. Is this selfishness? Not in the crude, grasping sense, but it is a transaction with our own psyche. It is a negotiation between our empathy and our ego. We help a friend in need. We do it because we care. But we also do it because we are reinforcing a bond, investing in a relationship that we may one day need to call upon. We are building social capital. The language of friendship is the language of reciprocity, spoken so fluently that we forget it is a language at all. We keep score, not on a ledger, but in our hearts. We remember who showed up for us, and we feel the weight of obligation towards those we have not shown up for. This is not a cold, calculating mercantilism. It is the warm, organic economy of the human heart. And then there is romantic love, the most powerful and mystifying of all. We fall in love. We speak of soulmates and the one. We believe we have found a person who will complete us, who will understand us perfectly, who will love us unconditionally forever. But look at the transaction. We fall in love with someone who meets our needs. They may be beautiful, which satisfies a biological and social need. They may be kind, which satisfies a need for safety and comfort. They may be witty and intelligent, which satisfies a need for stimulation and status. They may have a quality we feel we lack, offering a sense of wholeness. We are drawn to those who validate our existence, who reflect back to us an image of ourselves that we find desirable. The intoxicating early days of romance are a frenzy of mutual need meeting, a dance of projection and idealization. We are not loving the other person as they truly are. We are loving the feeling they give us of being seen, of being desired, of being less alone. The great psychoanalyst Carl Jung suggested that we often fall in love with people who project our own anima or animus, the unconscious inner feminine or masculine ideal. We are in a sense falling in love with a part of ourselves. The ancient Greeks, with their characteristic clarity, understood this complexity. They had multiple words for love. Eros was the passionate, desiring love, the longing for the beautiful other. It was understood as a kind of lack, a desire for what one does not have. Philia was the deep, affectionate love between friends and family, a love built on mutual respect, shared values, and reciprocity. It was explicitly a two-way street. Even agape, the selfless, unconditional love often associated with God, was understood in the Christian tradition as a love that flows from God to humanity, with the ultimate expectation of salvation and union with the divine. The concept of a completely one-way, no-strings-attached, purely altruistic human love is, upon examination, a modern and perhaps untenable ideal. This is not to say that love is not real, or that kindness is not genuine. It is to say that they are not what they appear to be on the surface. They are not ethereal substances floating free of human need. They are complex, dynamic, and often beautiful barter systems. They are exchanges of emotional goods, comfort, validation, excitement, security. They are trades in psychological support and social status. They are the primary currencies in the economy of human connection. We love others, in part, for the reflection of ourselves that we see in their eyes. We seek out those who confirm our sense of who we are, who make us feel intelligent, attractive, worthwhile. The beloved becomes a mirror, and we fall in love with the flattering image we see reflected back. This is why betrayal feels so catastrophic. It is not just the loss of the other person, it is the shattering of the mirror. The image of ourselves that we had invested in, the self that was validated by their love, is suddenly revealed as a lie. We are left not only alone, but unknown and unknowable even to ourselves. The truth is that we are islands, as the poet said, but we are islands with badly built bridges. We spend our lives frantically trying to connect, to span the gap between ourselves and others. We send out signals, build structures, reach out with trembling hands. We do this not out of pure, disinterested generosity. We do it out of a desperate, profound, and utterly human need not to be alone. The need is the engine, the connection is the bridge, and the bridge, however beautiful, is built to serve the need. Every act of giving, when examined closely, is also an act of getting. You give your time, and you get a sense of purpose. You give your attention, and you get a sense of connection. You give your love, and you get, at the very least, the feeling of having loved, which is a feeling you value. To see this clearly is not to become a cynic, to retreat into a cold and isolated fortress of suspicion. Cynicism is just another defense mechanism, another coat worn to protect against the cold. To see this clearly is to become honest. It is to understand the currency of the human heart. It is to recognize that the economy of love, like any economy, runs on exchange. The question is not whether there is exchange. The question is whether the exchange is fair, whether it is mutual, whether it enriches both parties. A love that is all give and no get is not a love. It is a slow spiritual suicide. A love that is all get and no give is exploitation. The healthiest, most enduring love is the one where both parties are aware, at some level, of the transaction, and both feel they are getting a good deal. They are getting companionship, support, laughter, meaning. They are getting a partner in the lonely business of being alive. And in that mutual, honest exchange, something remarkable happens. The transaction transcends itself. It becomes something that feels and perhaps is far greater than the sum of its parts. It becomes a partnership, a sanctuary, a shared story. So the third truth, that love is transactional and altruism a myth, is not an ending. It is a beginning of a different kind of understanding. It strips away the sentimental fantasy of a love that asks for nothing, and in its place, it offers the possibility of a love that is honest about what it needs. It asks you to stop pretending that you are a fountain of pure, selfless giving, and to start acknowledging the very real, very human needs that your love is trying to meet. It asks you to look at your relationships not as sacred mysteries beyond analysis, but as vital, living economies that require constant attention, investment, and renegotiation. It asks you to be a good trading partner in the economy of the heart. And that, perhaps, is a more sustainable, more realistic, and ultimately more rewarding way to love than chasing the impossible ghost of pure unconditional altruism. This brings us to the edge of another vast territory. If we are driven by forces we do not understand, if our morality is a fragile luxury, and if our deepest connections are complex transactions, then we must ask, why do we go to such lengths to hide all of this from ourselves? Why the elaborate denial? Why the beautiful, comforting stories? The fourth truth provides the answer. It is the truth that lies at the very core of human motivation, the engine that drives so much of our behavior, both glorious and terrible. It is this: you will do anything to avoid the abyss of your own insignificance. We are, as far as we know, the only species that is aware of its own mortality. The squirrel dashing across the road does not contemplate the philosophical implications of being hit by a car. It simply dodges. But we know with an absolute and inescapable certainty that one day the sun will rise, the world will turn, and we will be gone. The consciousness that at this moment is reading these words, that feel so solid, so permanent, so much like me, will cease to exist. It will be as if it had never been. This knowledge is not a casual fact we carry in our back pocket. It is a wound. It is a deep existential crack in the foundation of our being. It is the abyss that the philosopher Pascal wrote about, the infinite space between the stars that terrifies us, and it is always, always staring back. The 20th century cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker won the Pulitzer Prize for his book The Denial of Death, in which he argued that this fear of death, this terror of insignificance, is the primary motivator of human behavior. He built on the work of Freud and the existential philosopher Soren Kierkegaard to propose that our entire civilization, our cultures, our religions, our nations, our careers, our art, all of it is a vast, elaborate, and heroic defense mechanism against the paralyzing terror of our own mortality. Becker called these defenses immortality projects. An immortality project is anything that allows us to feel that we are part of something larger than ourselves, something that will outlast our brief flickering existence. It is our attempt to become a ripple in the pond of time, to leave a mark that says, I was here, I mattered. Think of the most obvious immortality projects. The pharaohs built pyramids, vast stone mountains to house their bodies and their treasures for eternity. They believed that if their name was remembered, if their ka was sustained, they would achieve a form of immortality. We may smile at their naivete, but we can do the same thing. We build careers, striving for a promotion, a title, a name on the door. We want to be the CEO, the partner, the tenure professor. These titles are our pyramids. They are markers of significance that we hope will outlast us. We accumulate wealth. Money is in one sense just numbers in a bank account, but in another sense, it is a concrete measure of our success, our power, our worth. It is a scorecard in the game of life. To have more than others is to be winning, and being a winner feels like a defense against the ultimate loss, which is the loss of self. The billionaire building his empire is engaged in the same fundamental project as the pharaoh building his tomb. We raise families. Our children are our most direct link to the future. They carry our genes, our names, our mannerisms, our stories. In them we live on. The desperate love we feel for our children is intertwined with this project. They are our hope for a kind of biological immortality. When we look at them, we see a future that extends beyond our own expiration date. We create art, write books, compose music. We are trying to capture something of our inner world, our unique perspective, and cast it out into the stream of time, hoping that it will be picked out by future generations. The artist who slaves for years over a canvas is not just making a pretty picture. He is saying, this is what I saw, this is what I felt, this is proof that I existed. The writer hopes that someone somewhere in 100 years will read their words and feel a flicker of recognition, a connection across the void. We join nations and ideologies. We pledge allegiance to a flag, a cause, a political party. We become part of a collective we that feels more powerful, more permanent than our solitary I. We will fight and die for our country, not just for a piece of land, but for an idea, a story about who we are and what we stand for. The nation is an immortality project. It existed before us, and it will exist after us. By merging our identity with it, we borrow a sliver of its permanence. And we worship gods. Religion is perhaps the most direct and comprehensive immortality project of all. It offers not just a symbolic victory over death, but a literal one. It promises that the self, the soul, the essence of who we are will continue. It provides a cosmic narrative, a story in which we have a starring role. Our lives are not just random, meaningless flickers. They are part of a divine plan. Our suffering has purpose. Our death is a transition. This is a powerful, and for billions of people, a deeply comforting and meaningful story. It is the ultimate bulwark against the abyss. The harsh truth that Becker forces us to confront is that all of these projects in the grand cosmic scheme are utterly futile. The universe...
And because we cannot bear to look at it, we fight. The anxiety that this knowledge creates is not a quiet, manageable hum. It is a roaring engine of human conflict. It is why we are so deeply, violently offended when our beliefs are challenged. If someone mocks your religion, your political party, your favorite sports team, or even your taste in music, they are not just expressing a differing opinion. To your terrified, defensive psyche, they are attacking your immortality project. They are poking a hole in the very scaffold you have built to keep yourself from falling into the abyss. They are telling you that the story you are living by, the story that gives your life meaning and protects you from the terror of death, is a lie. And that is a threat so profound that people will kill and die to defend against it. This explains the fury of religious wars, the passion of political partisanship, the deep offense we take at any criticism of our chosen identity. We are not just arguing about ideas, we are fighting for our psychological survival. The stranger who worships a different God, who pledges allegiance to a different flag, who believes a different political ideology, is not just different. They are a threat. Their very existence is a living alternative to our own immortality project, and that alternative whispers to us in the night. What if you are wrong? What if your story is just one story among many? What if, underneath it all, there is nothing? To silence that whisper, we must denigrate, dismiss, or destroy the other. We must prove that our project is the only true project, the only path to salvation, the only story worth living and dying for. This is the engine of so much human cruelty. It is not just greed or power lust, though those are often the tools. It is the deep existential terror of meaninglessness. The Nazi who sought to exterminate the Jews was not just driven by economic resentment or political ambition, though those played a part. He was driven by a toxic mythology, a twisted immortality project that promised a 1,000-year Reich, a master race that would inherit the earth. The Jew was defined as the ultimate other, the enemy of this project, and therefore had to be erased. The same psychological dynamic, in less extreme forms, plays out in every conflict, every prejudice, every act of dehumanization. To truly sit with this fourth truth, to feel its weight, it's to experience a profound sense of vertigo. It is to realize that all of human civilization, with its cathedrals and its concentration camps, its symphonies and its slaughterhouses, is, in a sense, a magnificent, fragile, and desperately sad scream against the dark. We are all, from the highest saint to the lowest criminal, engaged in the same fundamental project, trying to matter, trying to be someone, trying to convince ourselves and the world that our brief flicker of consciousness is not just a random, meaningless accident in an indifferent universe. This realization can be devastating. It can lead to nihilism, to the conclusion that nothing matters, so why bother? But it can also lead to something else. It can lead to a profound sense of compassion. When you see the billionaire in his relentless pursuit of more, the politician in his desperate grab for power, the fanatic in his violent certainty, you are not just seeing greed or ambition or evil. You are seeing fear. You are seeing a fellow human being, terrified of their own insignificance, engaged in a desperate and ultimately doomed attempt to build a mountain that will touch the sky. And in that recognition, it becomes harder to hate. It becomes possible, perhaps, to feel a kind of sorrowful kinship. We are all in the same boat, all screaming into the same wind, all trying to stay afloat on the same dark sea. And it also forces a question upon ourselves, the most important question of all. If all our grand projects are ultimately futile, if no human achievement can truly conquer death and insignificance, then what is left? Is there a way to live that does not depend on these elaborate, fragile denials? Is there a way to face the abyss with open eyes and to live not in spite of it, but because of it? This is the question that the remaining truths will circle, the question that haunts the rest of this journey. For now, it is enough to sit with the weight of the fourth truth, to feel the floor drop out, and to begin the slow, terrifying process of learning to fly in the empty space. And that empty space, that vertiginous freedom, brings us to the fifth truth. If our entire civilization is a defense against insignificance, then the self that is being defended must be the most carefully guarded fortress of all. The fifth truth is about the walls of that fortress. It is this: your perception of reality is a lie, carefully constructed to serve your ego. You do not see the world as it is. This is not a poetic statement. It is a neurological and psychological fact. You see the world as you need to see it. Your brain is not a passive window, a clear pane of glass through which reality shines unobstructed. It is an active, aggressive, and relentless filter. Its primary function is not to show you the truth. Its primary function is to keep you alive and to protect the fragile, constructed self that is your ego. And to do that, it must distort reality. It must edit, embellish, and outright fabricate. It must tell you a story about the world and about your place in it that is coherent, flattering, and above all, manageable. This is the realm of cognitive biases, the systematic errors in thinking that are not exceptions to normal cognition, but rather the very fabric of it. They are not bugs in the software. They are core features of its design. They are the ego's immune system, constantly attacking and rejecting any information that might threaten its integrity. The most pervasive of these is confirmation bias. You do not seek the truth. You seek confirmation of what you already believe. When you scroll through your newsfeed, you are not weighing evidence from all sides. You are clicking on the headlines that agree with your worldview and scrolling past the ones that challenge it. When you get into an argument, you are not genuinely listening to the other person's point of view. You are waiting for your turn to speak, searching your mental database for counterarguments, for evidence that proves you are right and they are wrong. Your brain is a magnificent confirmation machine, and its sole purpose is to ensure that you always win the argument, at least inside your own head. You are not a seeker of truth. You are a lawyer for a client, your ego, that can never be found guilty. Then there is the Dunning-Kruger effect, that deliciously cruel irony of human cognition. It is the phenomenon whereby incompetent people are unable to recognize their own incompetence. They are trapped in a double bind. Not only do they lack the skill or knowledge to perform well, they lack the very metacognitive ability to recognize that they are performing poorly. As a result, they are blissfully, confidently wrong.
They vastly overestimate their own abilities. Meanwhile, those who are truly competent often suffer from the opposite. They underestimate their own abilities, assuming that tasks which are easy for them must be easy for everyone. The unskilled are awash in unjustified confidence. The skilled are plagued by unjustified doubt. And this too serves the ego. The incompetent person's ego is protected by a bubble of ignorance. The competent person's humility is often a social grace, but it can also be a form of self-protection, a way of lowering expectations and avoiding the terrifying burden of being seen as an expert. Consider the fundamental attribution error, the workhorse of our self-serving narratives. This is the tendency to explain our own behavior based on our situation and the behavior of others based on their character. When I screw up, it's because of circumstances. I was tired, I was stressed, the traffic was bad, my coffee was cold. I'm not a bad person. I was a good person in a bad situation. But when you screw up, you're incompetent, you're lazy, you're rude, you're a bad person. When I succeed, it's because of my hard work, my talent, my intelligence. When you succeed, it's because you got lucky, you had an unfair advantage, you cheated. This bias is the ego shield and its sword. It deflects blame away from the self and directs it outward. It claims credit for success and denies responsibility for failure. It ensures that in the ongoing drama of our lives, we are always the hero, and others are either sporting cast or villains. This pervasive self-deception extends to our memory. We do not remember the past accurately. We remember a story about the past, a story that has been edited and revised countless times to fit our current self-image. You remember your successes in vivid detail. Your failures are hazy, attributed to circumstances or the malice of others. You remember the times you were kind and generous, the times you were selfish or cruel. They are conveniently forgotten or reframed as necessary harshness. Your memory is not a library of objective facts. It is a personal mythologist, constantly rewriting your personal history to make you look good. We are all walking around in cocoons of self-serving fictions. We believe we are objective, that we see things clearly, that we are the only sane person in the world gone mad. We look at others and see them drowning in their biases, their prejudices, their narrow-mindedness. But the truth, the harsh and humbling truth, is that they are looking at us and seeing the same thing. We are all in the same boat, each convinced that we are the only one who sees the shore clearly. The implications of this are staggering. Your political beliefs, those convictions you hold so passionately that you argue about with friends and family, they are not the result of pure reason, of carefully weighing all the evidence and arriving at the most logical conclusion. They are to a significant extent a representation of your personality, your upbringing, your social group, and your unconscious emotional needs. You believe what you believe because it feels right, because it aligns with your identity, because it is the belief of your tribe. Then and only then do you go looking for reasons to justify it. You are not a free thinker. You are a justification machine. You are constantly generating rational explanations for decisions your unconscious mind has already made, based on criteria you are not even aware of. The same is true of your moral intuitions. You feel that something is wrong, say eating meat, with a visceral sense of disgust or outrage. Then you construct a moral philosophy to explain that feeling. Or you feel no such disgust, and you construct a different philosophy to justify your continued consumption. The feeling comes first, the reason comes second. The great psychologist Jonathan Haidt, in his book The Righteous Mind, uses the metaphor of a rider on an elephant. The elephant is the unconscious, intuitive, emotional part of your mind. The rider is your conscious, reasoning self. The rider evolved, Haidt argues, not to guide the elephant, but to serve it. When the elephant wants to go in a certain direction, the rider's job is to scout ahead and find a plausible path, and to defend the elephant's choices to any onlookers. The rider is the press secretary, not the president. This is the fifth truth in all its humbling, esoteric glory. You are not a rational animal. You are a rationalizing animal. The difference is everything. It means that the great Socratic command, know thyself, is not a gentle suggestion for personal growth. It is an almost impossibly difficult task. It means that the first and most important step in any genuine inquiry is not to look outward at the world, but inward at the filter through which you perceive the world. It means that the question, why do I believe what I believe, is one of the most terrifying and most liberating questions you can ever ask yourself. Because the honest answer, the answer that emerges after you strip away all the justifications and rationalizations, is almost always this: because I need to. You need to believe your political party is right because it is your tribe. You need to believe you are a good person because the alternative is too painful. You need to believe the world is just because the thought of random, undeserved suffering is unbearable. You need to believe your life has meaning because the abyss is always waiting. Your beliefs are not windows onto truth. They are life rafts, and you will cling to them, defend them, and refuse to question them, because letting go means drowning. This brings us to the sixth truth. This internal dishonesty, this desperate need to protect the ego and its immortality projects, does not operate in a vacuum. It operates in a world full of other people, other egos, other tribes. And when these internal defense systems interact, the result is the most powerful and dangerous force in human history. The sixth truth is this: tribalism is not a choice, it is an operating system. We evolved in small groups. For the vast majority of human history, our ancestors lived in bands of perhaps 50 to 150 individuals. In that world, survival depended on two things above all else: fierce, unquestioning loyalty to the in-group, and deep, abiding suspicion of the out-group. The stranger was not a...
It begins, as all things of true consequence must begin, not with a bang, not with a proclamation, but with a question. It is a question so simple, so apparently innocent, that it slips past the gates of our consciousness unnoticed, like a wisp of smoke under a door. Yet once inside, it lingers. It curls around the beams of our certainty and chars the foundations of our complacency. The question is this: why are we like this? You have asked it. I have asked it. Every human being who has ever paused, even for a single breath, to contemplate the sheer, bewildering spectacle of human existence has asked it. You see it in the newspaper, on the glowing rectangle of your phone, in the history books that gather dust on shelves, in the eyes of a stranger on a subway, and in the mirror on a sleepless night.
We are a species capable of composing the Missa Solemnis and of building the gas chambers of Treblinka. We can split the atom to power a city or to vaporize one. We can fall to our knees in awe before a sunset, and we can tear another human being apart with our bare hands over a perceived slight. We are, as the poet said, the glory, jest, and riddle of the world. But the riddle is not an abstract puzzle to be solved over brandy in an Oxford common room. It is a wound. It is the central, bleeding contradiction of our existence. And for the most part, we have learned to look away. We spend our lives constructing elaborate narratives, vast and intricate mythologies designed to explain away this contradiction. We tell ourselves, essentially good. We are rational. We are the apex of a grand progressive story, the heroes of an epic that began in the primordial ooze and is destined to end among the stars. We have created civilization to tame the beast within, and we believe, with the faith of true believers, that the beast is caged. We look at the atrocities of the past, the Crusades, the Inquisitions, the slave ships, the world wars, and we categorize them. They are aberrations. They are the products of ignorance, of superstition, of a time before we knew better. They are locked away in a dark room in the basement of history, and we have thrown away the key. We are modern, we are enlightened, we are different. But the door is always there, and you can hear the scratching on the other side. The truth about human nature is not a pleasant fireside tale. It is not a reassuring lesson in self-improvement. It is a stark, unforgiving landscape of ice and stone, a place where the winds of primal impulse howl without mercy. It is a landscape that most of us spend our entire lives, our entire vast and complicated emotional and intellectual energies trying to ignore. To look upon it directly, to turn your gaze inward and refuse to flinch, requires a kind of courage that is rarer than heroism on a battlefield. It is the courage of radical self-honesty. For what you will see there is not only the worst of the world, reflected like a funhouse mirror, but the worst of yourself. The potential for every cruelty, every betrayal, every act of cowardice and indifference that has ever stained the pages of human history lies curled within you, sleeping, and it is dreaming. This is a journey into that landscape. It is not a brisk hike with a clear destination and a rewarding view. It is a slow, deliberate, and arduous descent. It is a walk through 10 of the harshest truths about what it means to be human. There will be no comforting conclusions here, no easy answers, no 7 steps to a better you. Only the cold, clear, and unforgiving light of reflection. Only the sound of your own footsteps on the stone. Let us begin with the first truth. It is perhaps the most foundational and the most consistently, the most passionately, the most violently denied. It is the truth from which all others spring, like poisoned rivers from a poisoned source. Here it is. You are not the hero of your own story. You are an animal, driven by impulses you do not understand. This is a hard saying. Who can hear it? We walk through the world with a profound and seemingly unshakable sense of self-awareness. We have a name, a history, a set of preferences, a political affiliation, a moral code. We have hopes and dreams and regrets. We experience this internal monologue, this constant chatter of the I, and we believe, with the certainty of a child believing in Santa Claus, that this I is the captain of the ship. We believe our decisions are the products of logic and reason, that we weigh evidence, consider alternatives, and arrive at conclusions through a process of conscious deliberation. We believe we are in control. But look closer. I do not mean look with your eyes, or even with your mind as you usually use it. I mean look with the cold, detached gaze of a biologist observing a specimen. Watch the subtle flare of heat in your chest, the almost imperceptible clench of your jaw when someone cuts you off in traffic. Before you can even formulate the thought, that person is a rude and dangerous idiot, your body has already reacted. Your amygdala has sounded an alarm. Your adrenal glands have squirted cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your heart rate has increased. Your muscles have tensed for action. The conscious thought, the indignant narrative you construct about the other driver, is not the cause of this reaction. It is the effect. It is the story your conscious mind tells itself after the animal has already reacted, to make sense of the physiological storm. Observe the quiet, creeping envy that insinuates itself into your consciousness when a friend announces a significant success. You smile. You offer congratulations. You may genuinely feel happy for them. But underneath, like a snake in the grass, there is something else. A flicker of comparison. A subtle sense of diminishment. A calculation of how their achievement affects your own standing in the invisible hierarchy of your social world. This is not a reasoned response. You did not choose to feel this way. It is the ancient software of status competition running beneath the modern operating system of friendship and social grace. It is the echo of a time when your tribe had a limited supply of meat and someone else's success in the hunt might mean less for you and your offspring. Notice the instinct, so powerful it feels like gravity, to align yourself with the powerful and to distance yourself from the weak. Watch how people gravitate towards the successful, the charismatic, the famous. Watch how they subtly, often unconsciously, avoid the failing, the sick, the socially awkward. This is not cruelty, at least not as a conscious choice. It is a survival mechanism. Throughout our evolutionary history, being associated with the powerful increased your chances of survival. Being associated with the weak could get you killed. This calculus is etched into the very structure of our social brains. We are still, in so many ways, the anxious primate, constantly scanning the troop for signs of who is rising and who is falling. These are not reasoned responses. They are not the products of a noble, rational mind. They are the echoes of 1,000,000 years of evolution. They are the ancient, stubborn, and powerful software that runs the hardware of your body. Your conscious thoughts, your carefully constructed sense of self, your I, is not the programmer. It is, at best, a user who is barely aware of the code running in the background. At worst, it is a passenger in a vehicle being driven by a ghost. You are a biochemical machine. This is not a metaphor. This is a statement of fact. Your thoughts, your moods, your desires, your very sense of who you are all inextricably tied to the ebb and flow of neurotransmitters and hormones, to the firing of neurons in specific patterns laid down by genetics and experience, to the complex interplay of electrical and chemical signals that constitute your nervous system. When you are in love, you are, in a very real sense, experiencing a carefully orchestrated neurochemical event designed to ensure pair bonding and reproduction. When you are angry, you are in the grip of a physiological cascade designed for conflict. When you feel spiritual awe, you are experiencing a specific pattern of brain activity that can be induced by magnetic stimulation. This does not make these experiences less real or less meaningful, but it does make them less yours than you think. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, that great diagnostician of the human soul, spoke of the will to power. He did not mean merely a crude lust for political dominance, though that is one of its manifestations. He meant a fundamental, pre-rational drive inherent in all life. It is the drive to grow, to expand, to overcome resistance, to become more than what one is. It is the force that makes the ivy climb the wall, the lion stalk the gazelle, the artist slave over a canvas for years, the scientist dedicate their life to a single elusive truth. This drive is not a choice. It is not something you decide to have. It is the condition of your existence. You are an expression of it, whether you know it or not. You may dress this drive in the finest clothes of altruism or piety or intellectual pursuit. You may call it ambition or love or the search for God. But at its root, It is the same impersonal, inexorable force that animates the simplest bacterium and the most complex ecosystem.
The poet murmurs, the painter strokes the canvas, the composer writes notes on a page. All of them are engaged in a desperate, heroic attempt to translate the ineffable, to take the private, subjective experience of their inner world and give it a form that can be shared with others. We look at a great work of art and feel a shiver of recognition. Yes, we think, that is exactly how I feel. But it is not exactly. It is a resonance, a sympathetic vibration. The artist has created a structure that allows us to project our own inner world onto it, and in that projection, we feel a moment of connection. But the artist's original experience, the specific constellation of feelings and thoughts that gave birth to the work, remains theirs alone. We are all, in the end, translators of a language that has no dictionary. The love you feel for your partner, your child, your parent, this love is the most real and powerful thing in your life. It shapes your days and defines your priorities, but it is yours. It is a unique emotional configuration that exists only in your consciousness. Your partner may feel love for you, a love that is equally real and powerful, but it is their love, not yours. The two loves are parallel lines, running close together, sometimes touching, but never merging. They can support each other, enrich each other, give each other meaning, but they can never become one. The mystical ideal of two souls merging into a single entity is a beautiful fantasy, but it is a fantasy. The hard truth is that we are, and always will be, separate. This fundamental isolation is the human condition. We are born alone, in the sense that we come into this world as a separate consciousness, trailing clouds of glory or nothing at all. We die alone, in the sense that the final passage, the last moment of consciousness, is ours alone to experience. No one can accompany us across that threshold. And in between, we are perpetually alone in a crowded room. We can reach out, we can touch, we can speak, we can love, but we can never fully close the gap. The other person is always, to some degree, a mystery. There is always a part of them we cannot access, a part of their inner world that remains hidden. The relationships we build are not bridges that close the gap. They are more like rafts, constructed with care and effort, that allow us to float alongside each other on the vast, dark ocean of existence. We can build them close together, close enough to touch, close enough to hear each other's voices above the wind and the waves. We can tie them together with ropes of shared experience, mutual trust, and deep affection. We can create a flotilla, a small community of rafts, bobbing together on the endless sea. But we never become a single vessel. We are always separate, always alone, always floating on our own small piece of wood. The connection, the love, the friendship is real. It is the most precious thing we have, but it does not dissolve the fundamental solitude. It only makes it bearable. To accept this ninth truth is to accept a profound and permanent loneliness at the core of your being. It is the price of having a self. It is the consequence of being a conscious, individual entity in a universe that seems designed for separation. But acceptance is not despair. To accept that you will never be truly understood is not to give up on communication. On the contrary, it is to approach communication with a new kind of humility and a new kind of urgency. If you know that perfect understanding is impossible, then every moment of genuine connection, every instance where two rafts bump gently against each other in the night, becomes a small miracle. It becomes a precious, fragile, and temporary victory over the isolating void. You stop demanding that the other person read your mind. You stop expecting them to know what you feel without your having to say it. You learn to use the clumsy tools of language with more care, more precision, and more patience. You learn to listen, not with the expectation of fully understanding, but with the openness to be surprised, to catch a glimpse of another world,
another universe floating alongside your own. The goal is not to merge. The goal is to connect as fully and as honestly as two separate beings can. And finally, after walking through this long, dark gallery of truths, after confronting the animal within, the fragility of our morality, the transactions of our love, the terror of our insignificance, the lies of our perception, the tribalism of our nature, the dark pleasures of our hearts, the illusion of progress, and the fundamental solitude of our existence, we arrive at the 10th truth. It is the truth that underlies all the others, the foundation upon this entire edifice of harshness rests. It is the truth you have been avoiding since the first word of this monologue, the truth that flickers at the edge of every thought and haunts the silence of every night. It is this: there is no meaning. There is only the meaning you are too afraid to live without. We have peeled back the layers of self-deception one by one. We have exposed the animal drives, the unconscious impulses, the fragile morality, the transactional love, the desperate scramble for significance, the biased perception, the tribal instincts, the secret schadenfreude, the illusion of progress, and the unbridgeable solitude. We have stared into the abyss of our own insignificance and felt the vertigo. We have seen that the universe is vast, cold, and indifferent to our existence. And now, we are left with the final, inescapable question. So what? If we are just biochemical machines, driven by unconscious impulses, programmed by evolution to survive and reproduce, doomed to die and be forgotten in a universe that is utterly indifferent, then what is the point? Why get out of bed in the morning? Why be kind to a stranger? Why fall in love? Why create art? Why strive for anything at all? Why not simply give up, sink into hedonism or nihilism and wait for the end? The existentialist philosophers of the 20th century, most notably Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, grappled with this question more directly than any thinkers before them. They began with the premise that existence precedes essence. This means that you are not born with a preordained purpose, a built-in meaning that you are meant to fulfill. You are not a paperweight designed to hold down papers. You are not a knife designed to cut. You are born, you exist, and only then, through your choices and your actions, do you create who you are. You are, in Sartre's famous phrase, condemned to be free. Condemned because you did not choose to be born, and free because, once here, you are responsible for everything you do. There is no cosmic script. There is no divine plan. There is only you and the choices you make. Camus, in his essay The Myth of Sisyphus, posed the problem most starkly. He argued that the fundamental philosophical question is whether or not life is worth living. He looked at the human condition, our desperate need for meaning, and the universe's utter indifference to that need, and called this confrontation the absurd. We are like Sisyphus, the figure from Greek myth who was condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down for all eternity. His task is meaningless, futile, and endlessly repetitive. And yet, Camus argues, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because in his conscious acceptance of his futile fate, in his clear-eyed recognition of the absurdity of his task, he finds a kind of defiant freedom. He is the master of his own small, meaningless domain. The struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart. This is the 10th truth, in all its terrifying glory. The universe does not care if you are good or evil, happy or sad, alive or dead. It has no plan for you. There is no cosmic scorecard keeping track of your virtues and your sins. There is no divine purpose guiding your steps. There is no pre-written script. All the meaning you experience in your life, the love for your family, the passion for your work, the beauty of a sunset, the thrill of discovery, the comfort of faith, is not found in the world lying around like pebbles on a beach waiting to be picked up. It is projected onto the world by you. It is a story you tell yourself to make the chaos bearable. It is a meaning you create, not one you discover. The religious person finds meaning in God's plan. Their life is a chapter in a divine story. Their suffering a test. Their death a transition to a better world. This is a powerful and, for billions, a deeply satisfying meaning creation project. The humanist finds meaning in humanity's progress. They dedicate their lives to making the world a little bit better for future generations, believing that their small contribution is part of a grand upward march toward a more just and enlightened civilization. The hedonist finds meaning in pleasure. They seek to maximize the moments of joy, sensation, and delight in their brief time on Earth, believing that the pursuit of happiness is the only rational goal. The artist finds meaning in creation. They pour their inner world onto canvas or into words or into sound, seeking to capture something true and beautiful, to leave behind a trace of their unique perspective. The parent finds meaning in their children. They pour their love and energy into nurturing the next generation, finding in their offspring a living legacy, a continuation of themselves into a future they will not see. But these are all acts of faith. They are all choices. They are all, in the end, human constructions, built on the shifting sands of a meaningless universe. And they are all fragile, because they are all human. They can be shattered by a single tragedy, a single